Queen vocalist Freddie Mercury made history as both a musician and member of the LGBTQ+ community. While many look back on the artist as an inspiration, given his intense and high-profile lifestyle, it's only natural he made a few enemies. It's perhaps no surprise that Sid Vicious, the bassist for the notorious British punk band the Sex Pistols, wouldn't be the biggest fan of Freddie Mercury or Queen. Whereas the stadium rock Queen hinged on theatrics and grand gestures for their performances, punk focused on rawness and authenticity in what was in many ways a reaction to how arguably bloated rock music had become by the mid-1970s. In addition to the fundamental ideological differences of their respective genres, however, it appears that Vicious had a deep-seated personal dislike for Mercury. In November 1977, Vicious gave an interview with BBC Radio 1 in which he discussed an encounter he had with a Queen singer. He described how utterly unattractive he found the vocalist, before making fun of him for his voice and interest in ballet.
He warbles away about, "Oh, the ballet is rather good this season." He's absolutely awful. I've never met anyone like him.
However, there was reportedly more to the meeting between the two men than Vicious publicly admitted. In 1977, both bands were recording separately at Wessex Sound Studios when Vicious entered Queen's recording area. Vicious sarcastically questioned Mercury about his love of ballet, a passion he was open about in interviews. Mercury then dubbed Vicious Simon Ferocious, prompting a confrontation between the pair. It climaxed with Mercury grabbing Vicious by the lapels and throwing him out of the room, along with any chance of a kinship between the artists. Regardless of individual musical taste, it is taken as fact that Freddie Mercury belongs at the top table of rock frontmen as a performer whose immense charisma and stage presence electrified their most memorable performances. However, not everyone was impressed by Mercury's stage abilities. In fact, even at his most popular, some of America's most respected music critics were ambivalent to his performances. The legendary journalist Lester Bangs, for example, described Queen's 1977 performances at Madison Square Garden as Fantasia for dodos and 14-year-olds in the Village Voice, while John Swenson described Queen as the most pretentious metal band extant in the same magazine. Even worse criticism came from Banks' protege Dave Marsh, who in 1979 penned a column for Rolling Stone in which he made his hatred for Mercury and Queen plain. Reviewing the band's latest studio album, Jazz, Marsh derided it as a dull pastiche that highlighted Mercury's throat-scratching vocals, and complained that through the penning of songs like We Will Rock You, Queen's legacy may not just be innovative performances. He wrote, "Queen may be the first truly fascist rock band. The whole thing makes me wonder why anyone would indulge these creeps and their polluting ideas." An early version of the progressive arena rock band Kansas was formed in 1970, the same year Queen first came together in London. Though Kansas would go on to enjoy huge commercial success later in the 1970s and for years thereafter, their emergence was slow, only breaking into the mainstream in the mid-70s with a number of albums already under their belt. Before that, they established themselves as a live act with frequent support slots, and featured on the same bill as Queen numerous times. In a 2003 interview with Get Ready to Rock, Kansas vocalist Steve Walsh opened up about his memories of those early days and what it was like mixing with some of the biggest acts of the day while still laboring in relative obscurity. He described the experience as generally positive, highlighting that many of the bands they opened for, including Queen, were very friendly. However, he reserved some scorn for Freddie Mercury, saying, "He was a prima donna, diva if you will. That's about having an ego bigger than you are talented, bigger than you deserve." The British Capital Radio DJ Kenny Everett played an instrumental role in making Queen one of the biggest rock acts of all time, thanks to his full-throated backing of Bohemian Rhapsody. Though now considered a progressive rock classic which remains a popular radio song, Queen's record label was anxious about the track's runtime. Being almost 6 minutes, Bohemian Rhapsody seemed unplayable for many commercial radio stations, who delayed its release while they considered other options.
It goes on forever, 6 bloody minutes.
Pity your wife if you think 6 minutes is forever.
However, the band themselves leaked the track to Everett, who teased portions of the song to listeners before famously playing it 14 times over 2 days, building excitement for its eventual release. Everett and Freddie Mercury were also close friends for many years and spent a great deal of time together enjoying London's burgeoning gay scene and nightlife. However, in 1986, Mercury was the victim of a series of exposés in the British tabloid newspapers that cast light on his sexuality and cocaine use. Shortly after, he and Everett, who was also a cocaine user, had an argument over the drug and the pair fell out. As Mercury's former lover, Jim Hutton, recalled in Freddie Mercury, the definitive biography, "They never made up. If we'd see him out and about around the gay clubs, they never spoke. All those newspaper stories about Kenny being at Freddie's bedside were fabricated." Another British musician who's made no secret of his dislike of Freddie Mercury is Robert Smith, lead singer and songwriter of the veteran British goth rock and post-punk band The Cure. Smith is famously truculent in interviews and is happy to attack elements of culture that he just doesn't vibe with. In 2004, Smith's band was going through an upturn in interest thanks to a new generation of indie bands emerging from the UK, who cited The Cure's 1980s and 1990s work as their inspiration. In response, veterans took several of them on the road and released a new self-titled album. At the same time The Cure was inspiring a new generation, a new wave of hard rock bands like The Darkness were plying their trade with Queen-inspired theatrics and charting in the UK, much to Smith's dismay. When asked by Rolling Stone what he thought of The Darkness, Smith responded, "Well, I never liked Queen. I can honestly say I hated Queen and everything that they did. To have that rehashed and reheated for a second time around is pretty weird. So no, I don't like The Darkness at all. I think they're a comedy band."